to this episode of Chris's Classic Cinema. I'm Chris Wired.
And I'm Jayden.
So for the next couple episodes, we're going to be doing like a mini-series within our series. A little something I like to call Wisconsin Legends. Now, for these episodes, we're going to be looking at local Wisconsin celebrities that have basically marked their legacy in Hollywood, as well as in Wisconsin as well. I'm talking about big names, Oscar winners and all that stuff, and today we're going to be starting with who is considered one of the most iconic Wisconsinites in Hollywood history. He was in so many films, and he ended up winning 2 Oscars during his career. I am talking about the Milwaukee native, Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was born in 1900 in Milwaukee, and he started his career in Hollywood around the start of the 30s. By the late 30s, he had won 2 Oscars in a row for the movies Captain's Courageous and Boys Town. We're not going to be reviewing either of those today, but we're going to be looking at 4 films that are some of his most popular. And, man, they were an interesting choice.
They were interesting choices. Before we get started any further, there will be viewer discretion as advised. Some of the movies that we're going to be talking about do have very, very vulgar language, so just to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So let's get to work. So for our first film, we're going back to 1950 with one of many films that Spencer Tracy starred in, especially when it comes to the comedy genre. Now this movie was a rom-com, and if the name of the film sounds familiar, that's because it was remade back in the 90s with Steve Martin. I'm talking about the original Father of the Bride. A man finds out that his daughter is engaged, and he is very reluctant about the idea of preparing for the wedding, as well as also letting his daughter grow up. Through him, we see the struggles of preparing a huge wedding, as well as how it affects him, his wife, as well as his own daughter. And this was really interesting.
Yeah, and if you've seen this movie, it's actually very true to the Steve Martin one as well. You can almost say that they're one and the same. So, however, I think this movie, where its strong suits lies, is very much, it's definitely more coded for this era. Definitely more coded for the 1950s.
Yes, that is true.
Like, some of the biggest problems that were going on at the time was, when it came to marriages, was, okay, am I going to have to pick, are we just going to have another mouth to feed, or is this guy actually going to be able to support himself and my daughter?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what it was like when my grandparents got married just a few years before this movie came out.
I mean, my grandparents got married about 15 years after this movie came out, so...
Yeah. Other than that, now this movie's a rom-com, but it's not like, laugh out loud funny.
No.
But that doesn't mean it's bad.
No,
it's actually more of if anything, I would say it's very sweet. It's a nice, sweet little movie.
Some would say, for those in the anime community, this is more of a slice of life than anything.
Good. That's an interesting way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about the cast. We have Spencer Tracy as the father of the bride himself, and you can just tell how much he is a nervous wreck about this whole thing.
Oh, well, and you can definitely tell, because he really is just thrust in this whole situation. He's watching the bills stack up and getting really nervous about it. At first he wanted it to be a small wedding and pushed for it, but then it became this massive church, wedding that was this massive overtaking and costing way more than he anticipated.
Not to mention also having about over 200 people within their house for the reception.
250 people.
Yeah. And then you have his wife, played by Joan Bennett. You can tell how supportive she is of both her husband and her daughter when it comes to preparing the wedding.
And Joan Bennett wasn't even the first pick. She got, originally, Hepburn was going to be in, the father of the bride.
Oh, yes.
Originally, she was going to be the mother, but the producers were like, that's too much of an A-team chemistry, so...
Well, here's the thing. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn were a couple at that time.
Yeah.
They would do 7 films together, including the last film we will be reviewing in this episode.
Yeah, and, they just thought it was a bit too on the nose, so they went with a second pick that they still, they went with her, Becca, because there was a little bit more, there was still chemistry because they have worked in previous films prior. But yeah.
And then you have Elizabeth Taylor as the daughter, and you can tell how emotional she can get throughout this whole scenario. First, she's very excited. Next, she's very reluctant. Mm-hmm. It's a roller coaster of emotions with her.
It really is. It really is.
And when it comes to her fiance, you can tell that they do have a spark.
Oh yeah.
And they're not like the typical perfect couple that you would see. No. They have their flaws, and you can tell that. But they want to get through this.
They want to get through it. But it's very much a back burner story because the story really is more focused on Tracy.
Yes, I agree. Especially when it comes to the whole setting up the wedding thing. I mean, you have the caterers, you have the people that are coming to the wedding, you have the wedding rehearsals, you have him trying on his old suit that ends up not fitting him.
Walking basically like a mummy. Because it was just so stiff and covered in mothballs.
Yeah. And when it comes to this movie, like I said, it's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's very sweet.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like, I would say it's like watching just like watching an old classic TV episode of, say, like I Love Lucy.
Yeah, and it's actually almost done that way on purpose. This movie was basically written for Tracy to be in this role, and for a while he decided that he didn't want to be in the movie, so they brought in some other comedians. But those comedians were way too showy, whereas Tracy, he knows how to be funny in the right moments, but he also knows how to be tender and serious in other moments.
Not to mention subtle.
Exactly.
When it comes to his role.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, there are some times where he is very supportive of his daughter.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's that whole scene of when they have a fight, and next you know, she wants to basically cancel the whole wedding.
Yeah.
But he wants to try to support her as much as he can.
Oh, yeah.
And when it comes to the wedding gifts, too, I mean, a clock version of the Venus de Milo?
Yeah.
Who would come up with a present like that?
Rich people. Because they were, both families in this movie were very wealthy.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the other in-laws.
Oh, yeah.
One of them happened to be Billy Burke. Some of you might recall her as Glinda the Good Witch in the classic Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah. And you can see that there's instant chemistry that they at first were faking, but after a few hours became genuine.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's other cast members too. There's a very young Russ Tamblyn as one of Spencer Tracy's sons. That same year he was in Samson and Delilah, and his most famous role is Riff in the original West Side Story.
Yes.
It's just so interesting seeing him when he was just a kid.
Oh yeah.
Then again, it's like seeing Mickey Rooney when he was a kid.
We've encountered that before in previous episodes where we see really, really, really young versions of an actor or actress who later who are better known for being much older roles.
I mean, when it comes to Elizabeth Taylor, I mean, this was still when she was really starting to become very popular. By the end of the 50s, she was basically a household name.
Oh yeah.
And next thing you know, in the 60s, she has her huge role as Cleopatra, where she ends up wearing like 40 costumes in a 4-hour movie.
Yeah.
I literally counted them. About 40 costumes in a 4-hour movie.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, well, all in all, this movie is pretty good.
Oh yeah, and the set design's very, very, very on point.
Very American.
Very Americana, upper middle class. Very much like also a more conservative approach too. This is very much a conservative movie as well. So definitely a definite slice of American pie type of movie in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, how would you compare this to, say, the Steve Martin version?
They're identical. Like, I would say that the Steve Martin version has a little bit more comedy thrown into it, but I'd say that they're basically follow the same plot point. I think that the Steve Martin version was very respectful of the original version and following the pacing and everything.
And I know that there's actually another remake of Father of the Bride made just a few years ago for Netflix.
And that one I don't know about.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to this version, it was a success at the box office. It was one of the top 10 highest-grossing films in 1950. It also received 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor, Spencer Tracy, and Best Screenplay.
Yeah.
And when it was also put in the American Film Institute's list of top 100 comedies.
Oh, and that's understandable. I would say that nowadays it's definitely not top 100 material, at least in my opinion. But to each their own, I guess. I mean, the comedy here is very much more subtle.
Yeah. I mean, there's that whole nightmare sequence that he has, and that's just surreal.
Oh, yeah.
But you can tell it basically symbolizes how much anxiety he's having about this whole situation.
Well, that's any wedding, though. I mean, it's a very real. That's why I say it's a slice of life, because it's literally a slice of a typical life, and it showcases how much turmoil there could be in a household when someone gets married.
Yeah. So all in all, what would you give this movie?
I'm going to give it a solid 3 out of 5.
I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
Oh, yeah. Like, honestly, you can watch. I mean, I don't know if I hardcore recommend it. Like, it's more of a matter of who do you like more. Do you prefer do you prefer Tracy, or do you prefer Martin? And honestly, either is a good option.
And just like the Steve Martin version, this one also got a sequel as well.
Oh, yeah.
Father's Little Dividend. Released a year earlier. A year later.
Don't do the sequels. From what I've heard, the sequels aren't that great.
Well, I actually heard that the sequel to the original Spencer Tracy version was a hit at the box office.
Right. But, nowadays a sequel like that would just be a straight-to-tape movie.
Yeah. So that was Father of the Bride. Now we're going ahead to 1958 with a film adaptation of one of the most popular books of the 1950s. Now, this was a book written by the very popular writer Ernest Hemingway. He was known for making a lot of very serious novels like A Farewell to Arms, The Sun Also Rises. This was based on the novella that earned him the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. I am talking about the Spencer Tracy film adaptation of The Old Man and the Sea. In Cuba, a fisherman ends up out in the middle of the Atlantic for 3 days trying to hook a giant marlin. During that time, he also has like this philosophical experience of trying to remember his past, as well as also trying to think about how much effort he's doing into getting this fish. Now, I know you said you didn't like this much.
No, I didn't like it this much.
But I honestly thought it was a very good adaptation. I mean...
Oh, no, it's a good adaptation of a book that's very philosophical. My problem was that it was just a really slow movie.
Well, I can understand how you're feeling, but it's not like a super long movie. I mean, it's only less than an hour and a half.
It is. It's an hour and a half movie. That I will give it credit for. I think a lot of the shortcomings with the movie is it's a lot of the same, him struggling with this fishing line for hours at a time, for days at a time.
3 days straight.
And, how do you convey that in film? How do you convey 3 days of fighting a fish in film? It's very difficult to, while maintaining that energy and focus that modern films require today.
Yeah, well, it's not just any fish. It's a blue marlin, and those things can be huge.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I recall reading on Wikipedia, they can be like some of the biggest that have been caught are between 15 to 1,600 pounds.
And this one's no different, where this was a massive, massive fish, and it showed in the movie.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the cast. You have Spencer Tracy as the main fisherman, Santiago, and you can tell how much he wants to get this fish.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, but...
Because along with that, he's also been sort of on a dry streak as well. He hasn't caught a fish in almost 3 months.
Oh, yeah. And that's, again, you could see that he was really struggling, but you could see that his hopes were pretty high throughout the movie, and, of course, then you have the little boy as well.
Yes, who who actually is friends with the old man, and who is actually the narrator of the story. You can tell how much he actually respects the old man, as well as also fascinated by his past.
Oh yeah.
Because the old man he's had adventures in Africa. He's a big baseball fan.
Not to mention he's gotten into several betting matches.
Yes, I mean that whole arm wrestling.
Oh yeah.
Sequence.
Yeah, that was like one of the first things that it reminded him of. This fish battle was the arm wrestling, because in the movie it said it was over a day.
Yeah, I can't imagine being in an arm wrestling match that long.
I wouldn't feel my arm.
Me neither.
1 hour would kill me.
Yeah. And when it comes to the fish, I mean, that's actually pre-recorded from a few years back. One of the collaborators of this movie was the actual catcher of the fish, but it wasn't in the Gulf of Mexico. It was actually on the coast, off the coast of Peru.
Yeah, and they managed to comp it in with blue screen of all things. This was one of the very first films ever to actually use a blue screen versus a green screen.
Well, when it comes to, there have been movies with blue screen before, but not as noticeable as, but they were more noticeable than this one.
This was done very, very well. When I read that this was blue screen, I'm like, really? I couldn't even tell. Like, they did a really, really good job comping that in.
Yeah.
I don't even know what scenes they comped in.
Yeah, and like I said, when it came to the fish that was caught, it was between 1,500 to 1,600 pounds. That was a world record at the time. But man, it's just insane how huge that fish can be, as well as resilient.
Yeah, well, when you're a one-man fishing army, like, you got it. It's just a struggle. It really is.
Especially when it comes to constantly having to deal with the rope, basically leaving burns on your hand.
Really emphasizes the struggle here.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to cinematography, it is gorgeous.
Oh yeah, it's very, very, very beautiful scenery. It's very good. Underwater sequences are very well.
Yeah, I mean,
seeing the sharks nibble away at his catch and he fights off the sharks.
Yeah, I mean, and also when it comes to the music, it is just beautiful. The music was composed by a very popular composer at that time called Dmitri Tiomkin. And when it comes to this movie, he ended up earning an Oscar for original score. Yeah. When it comes to the music, it is just gorgeous. I highly recommend the soundtrack.
Yeah, and overall, like I said, it's a solid movie. What'd you think of the beach scenes and all that?
Oh, they were nice. They really give that little sense of world building when it comes to that area of Cuba. Just a small town feeling.
Not far from Havana.
Yeah. And it also shows like how much everyone knows everybody.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah. And if I recall, I think this movie was a success at the box office. It did receive 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Actor, Spencer Tracy, and Best Cinematography. Like I said, it won an Oscar for Best Original Score, and I definitely think it deserved it.
I'm not sure. Like I said, this movie is really, really slow in its pacing. There's only so much you can do with a guy being in a boat fighting a fish.
Well, if you're looking for another version of this, there's actually 2 other versions. In 1990, there was a TV version with Anthony Quinn, and then in 1999, there was actually a 20-minute long animated short film that was painted entirely on glass and ended up earning an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film.
Now that would be interesting to see. That I would be willing to give a go. It's just I just found that the pacing of this movie was just really slow, and it didn't really hold my interest.
Well, the book isn't that long either. It's only about 120 pages, if I recall.
Yeah, and 120 pages, how long was the movie? Just under 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a lot of stuff you got to try and stretch out.
Yeah. If you also are fans of the book, I recommend an audiobook that was done by Charlton Heston.
Yeah, there are a lot of audiobooks actually. When I was doing research for this, I probably found 5 or 6 different audiobooks for the book. I really did. It was actually kind of surprising seeing how much material there was for the movie.
Yeah. So, when it comes to this movie in general, I know you're going to give it a low score.
I am.
but I'm going to give it maybe 3.5 out of 5 stars.
I'm giving it a 1.5 out of 5. It's just that slow and uninteresting to me.
Well,
I think it might be. I don't know if it's the lowest rating I'd give, but it's down there.
well, I think you gave that same one to The Slipper and the Rose.
I think I did. You're right. I did.
Yeah. But if you want, just see it once, just to see what it's like.
I guess. Sure.
So that was our take of The Old Man and the Sea. Now for our next film, we're going to head to 1963 with a really big comedy.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking about a huge A-list cast of comedians
Oh yeah.
on an insane chase. I'm talking about the classic comedy, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
Cool. Got it.
A bunch of people in California find themselves witnesses to a robber who dies, telling them about a secret stash he has of $350,000 somewhere in Southern California. Now they are all wanting to get the cash for themselves, and it's an insane chase to see who can get to it first. Along the way, there's also a aging chief of police who is actually more fascinated with the people who's interested with the chase as well.
Oh yeah. And this is his last big case as well. Played by, of course, Tracy.
Yeah, and this cast was insane.
It's an insane cast.
You had an A-list cast of some of the top comedians of that time.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking about like Phil Silvers, Jonathan Winters, Mickey Rooney, Buddy Hackett, Sid Caesar, Dick Shawn.
It's kind of insane.
As well as cameos too from like Buster Keaton, the Three Stooges,
Yeah.
even Don Knotts.
Yeah, it is kind of insane. And the more I watch this movie, I'm like, this is getting just more and more off the rails because they're adding in more and more comedians with different comedy styles, and they're all in their element somehow.
And somehow they work it so flawlessly.
They do. Well, it's more of a story of how 4 different parties, well, initially it's 4 parties, it becomes more like 6 or 7 by the end of the movie. I think it's 13 people that 14 people that make it there at the same time.
Yeah, and it's all for a hidden case of 350 grand. According to the U.S. inflation calculator, nowadays that would be almost 3.7 million
At this time of filming.
Yeah. So basically, they're trying. That's basically a fortune right there.
It is. And it's a really it has a lot of slapstick comedy elements too.
The slapstick is incredible. It's some of the best slapstick I've ever seen in a movie.
It honestly is. It's a really underrated movie in my book.
Yeah.
I never heard of this movie before this. And the amount of stuff going on in this movie is this is the kind of goofy movie I would expect from the 80s or 90s, not the 60s.
Yeah.
This movie came out in 63. That's really, and the amount of stuff that's going on. They brought in an old biplane from World War One. The ramshacked gas station that basically gets sneezed on and falls over. It just a bunch of wacky stuff happening, and it's interesting.
Let's talk about the cast.
Yeah.
You have the main group who is basically going all or nothing for the money.
Oh yeah.
You have Sid Caesar, as well as playing a guy who is along with his wife and his mother-in-law, played by Ethel Merman. And man, she is such a complainer.
You're being polite. You're being polite, Chris.
I'm not saying that word, if you know what I mean.
I'm not saying anything. I can't say anything. Again, this is one of those situations where I really want to say something, but I can't because I would be breaking several codes of ethics.
But still, she's so hilarious.
Oh, God.
You also have her son, played by Dick Shawn, who is most famous for playing LSD in Mel Brooks' The Producers.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically a mama's boy.
Buddy Hackett being his his nervous wreck of himself, that's screaming and
He and Mickey Rooney working together to get the cash, as well as ending up flying a plane that was originally piloted by Jim Backus.
Yeah.
And next you know, he's knocked out, and they're
trying. They're giving it their best.
You couldn't pay me $1 million to be on a plane like that.
You could. You know what? No. You could pay me $1 million. If Buddy Hackett was flying a plane and you said, hey, $1 million to get to have Buddy Hackett fly a plane with you, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, and next you know, there's Paul Ford as the colonel who's trying to instruct him. He was the mayor in the original Music Man.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, the cast into this is just... You also have another guy with his wife, and they end up locked up in a basement of a hardware store.
Uh-huh.
And next thing you know, they're trying everything they can to get out. Sledgehammers, dynamite, and all that stuff. Next thing you know, there's fireworks spewing up all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's an insane movie. It just gets more and more off the rails as the movie goes on.
And then you have Jonathan Winters, who's basically the lone guy who's trying to get the cash for himself. And next you know, he runs into Phil Silvers, who basically tosses him aside to get the cash for himself, and he loses his car in a river.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is just karma, in my opinion.
Karma. Sorry, I couldn't.
That was bad. That was bad by my standards. Jeez.
Yeah.
That was a bad one by my standards.
And you know, when it comes to Sid Caesar's wife, she's the only one in this group who is actually sane. She's the one who actually does not want the money.
No, you gotta have one straight character to kind of ground everybody.
And then you have Spencer Tracy as the chief of police who is following this whole thing.
Well, more of a detective than chief of police.
Yeah, I mean, you have the original guy who owned the cash, Jimmy Durant as Smiley.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Durant, if the name sounds familiar, he was famous for narrating the original Christmas cartoon Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about other animated cameos, one of the animators that did the beginning sequence of the movie actually would go on to work with the Peanuts.
Yes, Bill Melendez. And the title sequence is so good.
Again,
it was made by this incredible guy named Saul Bass, who was known for making some of the most iconic movie title openings ever.
This movie was just 5 years later. I think it would be way more of a hit than it was, in my opinion. It was still a pretty decent hit.
Yeah, but still, the cast is just, man.
It's so good. This movie was really far ahead of its time for what it was.
I mean, you have Spencer Tracy. He's having troubles with his daughter, who is voiced by Selma Diamond. He literally has two phones with his wife on one and his daughter on the other, and they're just talking to each other. And he's like, "Oh my God, how much worse can this day get?"
He just wants this case closed, so that he can rack in that pension bonus and go on a 3-week vacation to Hawaii. The man's earned it.
Yeah, but I'm not giving any spoilers.
Oh God, no.
Now let's talk about the production, because this is huge.
It really is a massive budget.
I mean, when it comes to the cinematography, it really gives you that sense of, okay, this is California, and we're on this insane chase to get the cash. And the car chases in this are incredible.
They are. I've been talking about wanting to do a car chase episode for how long? And if I had known this movie exists, this would have been a contender.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is right up there with Bullet.
Yeah.
Because my God, you literally see them going all over the place, just trying to get to that where the cash is.
Dodging and weaving and everything.
And even like I said, when it comes to the plane stunts, you couldn't pay me $1 million to be on any of those planes.
No, you couldn't.
Yeah, but when it comes to the slapstick, I mean, it is just hysterical.
It really is.
You have Jonathan Winters basically tearing apart an entire gas station.
You could not. Whoever designed that gas station, don't build my house. Whoever built that building doesn't have permission to build a shack, a garden shed in my backyard, let alone a house.
Yeah,
Right?
well-
Like, jeez. Like, that thing was like paper. Got torn apart like a freaking house of cards. Like, it got torn down like a house of cards.
Yeah, when it comes to and also when it comes to, I swear, some of the stunts in this movie are some of the best I have ever seen in a movie.
Yeah. Like, this movie is kind of insane. Like, I'll say it. It's like 5-10 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Like, this was a superstar cast before it was called a superstar cast.
And when it comes to the director of this film, Stanley Kramer, this was his first comedy. He mainly did drama movies before this. He had produced comedy movies before, but this was his first time directing one.
Mm-hmm.
And man, did it pay off.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of paying off, how did it do in the box office?
It ended up being the third highest grossing film in 1963, right behind How the West Was Won and Cleopatra.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, Jonathan Winters received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor, and the film also received 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Sound, Best Original Score, which is also really good.
It's a good soundtrack.
It also was nominated for the title song was also nominated for Best Song. That was pretty catchy.
Oh, yeah.
It was also nominated for cinematography and Best Film Editing.
Yeah, the cinematography in that with the overview shots.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It ended up winning one. It ended up being the first winner for Best Sound Editing.
It was very good because in the very opening you could hear that there was a very good and obvious Doppler effect for the cars honking at each other.
And the
It
sound
was
effects in
really,
this
really
movie
good.
are amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to this, it was also put in the American Film Institute's. It was named number 40 in the American Film Institute's top 100 comedies.
It needs to be higher.
Yeah, and I swear this movie is just. I heard that they're actually planning on making like a remake of this.
Oh good lord, how? How are you gonna make a remake of this?
I don't know, but
Because
you would have to have a really top-class comedians as well as a top-class script.
as well as the top class budget, only like a Disney could do it. Honestly, you're talking how much in today's dollars for a budget? Like $500 million?
I'm pretty sure it'd be as much as. I'm pretty sure it'd be as much as the. It would be even more than how much was in that suitcase.
Yeah, it would be. You would have to shovel more money at it than a Marvel Cinematic Universe film.
Yeah. Now, when it comes, I also forgot to mention the big W. I mean, now when it comes to where the film is actually, the location actually was, it's not there. But if you want to actually see a real big W with palm trees, you can actually see it at a country club in Hawaii.
Or if you want to go to the true big W's, you can either go to Whitewater or Waterloo.
Oh.
Those are the true big W's, in my opinion.
Well, then again, you're from Wisconsin.
Yes, another big W.
Yeah,
Take
well.
that, Wyoming.
Oh! You did not just go there.
Hey, you made a bad joke, I'm going to make another. You got me to walk off camera.
Okay, consider us even. So, what would you give this film?
I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5. It was a good film.
I'm giving it that too
It
because
was good. I liked it.
And now, if
I'll
anything,
watch it again.
there's actually 2 versions of this as well. on
Oh, yeah.
Blu-ray. The one that she saw was the edited version, which is just about 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yep.
Now, when it comes to there was an original roadshow version that was over about 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can actually see an almost completed version of it on a Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection.
Yeah.
And it's not. Now, just to warn you, if you do get that Blu-ray, the film is not 100% complete. There are some still shots and some very aged.
They had to basically resurrect the film from 40 millimeter.
Yeah.
It was filmed on 40 millimeter back in the day, and
Yeah,
not all of it survived.
It was originally released in the Cinerama Dome.
It was released in the Cinerama Dome. Actually, it was the first movie to be a single projector Cinerama movie.
Yeah.
Because any other Cinerama film before that was three projectors. This was a single.
Yeah, but still, this movie is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend it to anyone who is a big comedian fan.
Oh yeah.
Especially when it comes to those names like Mickey Rooney, Buddy Hackett, Jonathan Winters.
You got Three Stooges, man. You got Three Stooges, and you got, you know.
I read that when it came to their cameo, it got a huge laugh out of the audience.
Yeah.
And they were only on for like 5 seconds.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah. And so that was It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Now for our last film, we're going ahead to 1967 with Spencer Tracy's last film.
I mean, nick of time last.
Yeah, I mean, he literally died less than 3 weeks after filming this movie.
About 2 weeks after the film was closed and done filming, he dies, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, at the age of 67.
But you know what? This was probably the most controversial film he's ever done, but also the most influential film he's ever done.
That I can agree with, because this was groundbreaking at that time.
Oh, it was very groundbreaking.
This was made during the height of the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was and now this movie was his last film with the love of his life, Katharine Hepburn. They did 7 films together, most of them comedies, including classic ones like Woman of the Year, Adam's Rib. This one was his last with her, and she didn't even see this movie afterwards because she was devastated by his death.
Yeah, and this is considered a rom-com as well in its own right.
But it is a drama as well.
It is.
Now Stanley Kramer directed this as well. I am talking about the 1967 film, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Mm-hmm.
In San Francisco, a girl returns to her parents with her fiancé who happens to be African American. Now her parents are very liberal, but they are very reluctant at the idea of her being in an interracial relationship. But they are trying to do all they can to accept it, and next thing you know, the other parents come too, and they're as reluctant as they are.
Yeah, it comes as a big shock, you know, and it's definitely a hard watch in the first part of the movie, but it definitely picks up in a lot of ways towards the latter half.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
This movie was really groundbreaking because it was one of the very first films to talk about interracial relationships.
Yeah.
Especially at that time. Before this movie came out, it was banned. It was illegal to be in an interracial relationship in 17 states.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the case of Loving versus Virginia that it was completely deemed unconstitutional to not allow it.
Yeah.
So this movie was an important film for that time.
It was.
This was the time of the civil rights movement when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was at his peak.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this was released just a few months before he was killed.
Yeah. You know, in this movie, this was the intent. The intent was to challenge interracial relationships and the legality of it in America. That was the intent with this movie. And I thought it was very progressive of Spencer Tracy to even agree to do this, even in his poor health, because his health was declining pretty rapidly. He could only film for 3 hours a day, and the production company the insurance for the production company wouldn't even cover him if he were to die. You know, so a couple of people, so a couple of the producers comped their own pay just so that way that he could have that assurance just in case.
Yeah, but still, when it comes to the cast in this, it is great.
Oh, it's a fantastic cast.
I mean, you have Spencer Tracy with Katharine Hepburn. You have Sidney Poitier at his prime.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this was the same year as his iconic role as Mr. Tibbs in the Heat of the Night.
Oh, yeah, and Katharine Hepburn is, like, being an absolute savage in this movie, you know, just completely tearing down the stereotype right then and there, even going as far as firing her second-hand woman of the art gallery, basically on the spot.
Yeah. Let's talk about the cast. You have the main parents, played by Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. You can tell how much they love their daughter, but you can tell how reluctant they are with this whole idea of them getting married.
and you could see them kind of piece it together and justifying it in their own way, going along the lines of, okay, well, we raised her to not be bigoted at all. And they straight up say that. They said, we raised our daughter to not be like this. We didn't say anything about interracial relationships. So to these two, they are just a man and a woman who want to get married. They aren't a black man and a white woman wanting to get married. They are just a couple who want to get married.
But the thing is, they've only known each other, they've only been in a relationship for not even 2 weeks. Not even 2 weeks.
10 days. And now all of a sudden, they get less than a day to give the couple the blessing.
And here's the thing, the movie takes place only in 1 day.
It does. Less than a day.
Yeah. And then you have the couple played by Sidney Poitier and Catherine Houghton, who actually is Katharine Hepburn's niece.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this was her first film role. And it's really interesting seeing her and her aunt together because they really work well together.
They work extremely well together.
I mean, when it comes to when it comes to Sidney Poitier's character, he's a doctor. He graduated college.
A very upstanding gentleman. Polite. Very cordial.
He used to have a family of his own, but they tragically died in a train crash.
Mm-hmm.
And next, they meet at this convention in Hawaii, and they fall in love. And the girl even said she fell in love with him in not only about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's some of you now when it comes to the girl, Joey, she is very optimistic about this.
Extremely optimistic. Extremely no, we are doing this no matter what.
I have found the man of my dreams, and I don't care what anyone is going to say about it.
In fact, out of everybody, the second most enthusiastic person is the Catholic priest.
Yes.
Who happened to know who the doctor was like, wow, you are actually really accredited in your field. You are the bee's knees.
Yes, Monsignor, played by Cecil Calloway.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell how supportive he is of this couple.
Oh, yeah.
And he even calls out Spencer Tracy for being very reluctant about this.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easy to understand why they are so reluctant, because racial tensions were extremely high at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
Not only, so they were really thinking about he was thinking about his daughter's safety in the movie, right?
Yeah, I mean.
And not only that, but the other thing is you're giving this poor guy less than 8 hours to make up the mind of giving the blessing or not. And if you don't give the blessing, the marriage isn't going to work at all.
Even the maid of the house was against this whole idea because she thought that he was mainly marrying her for their money or something.
Yeah, just completely was off balance with that. And even in the end, and my favorite scene in the whole movie, because throughout the movie, at first, I was really reluctant to even recommend it. I'm still reluctant to recommend it, and I don't think I will.
Well, personally, I think you should see it at least once.
I don't think it's. I think that if you do watch it, viewer discretion is advised. But anyways, because the language is extremely strong and dated.
Yes, this was made around the time when the production code was basically going down the drain, and next if I had to put a modern movie rating on this, I'd give it a PG-13.
Oh no, I wouldn't. Rated R. Rated R. Straight up, rated R. I would give it a rated R. Full stop. But it's that last monologue sequence that Spencer Tracy does at the very end of the movie that kind of won me over, honestly. Especially when the very first thing he said, one of the first things he says was, "And you were the beginning of the problem," and he pointed to the maid because it's true. The maid was the one that had been making wisecrack comments the entire movie, and even at one point confronting the doctor and just berating him.
Even saying he wasn't that good looking.
Yeah, which
that got a good laugh out of me.
Oh, completely off base in my opinion. The guy is a looker.
And also when it came to Katharine Hepburn's character, you have the lady who's in charge of her art gallery. She's very bigoted, and without saying a single thing, basically without even saying a thing, she basically says, "You're fired. Now get in your car and go."
It was so beautiful.
I was like, oh!
That was so beautiful. I'm like, dang, they didn't hold back at all.
she was flawless.
Oh, absolutely. Again, just did not hold back at all one bit. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
And then
this won me over.
And then you have the parents of Sidney Poitier's character, and they are as reluctant about this relationship as the other couple, as the main couple is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you have when it comes to the dad, he thinks that his son isn't ready for this.
No, and I with the turmoil, right? But as you know, as the son said, you lived your life as a black man. I'm living my life as a man. That is the difference here.
And then you have the mother, played by Bea Richards, who is very supportive.
Oh yeah.
And she even calls out on Spencer Tracy because he hasn't given them his blessing yet.
Well, and the premise for behind that was like, oh, well, he's just an old man that, lost that feeling of love and is just kind of hanging around. And you can see, and one of the most again, the monologue alone is worth the watch.
I mean, this was possibly out of all the movies we've seen with Spencer Tracy, this was perhaps one of his best performances.
It was his best monologue ever. And the fact that he was doing it basically with his dying breath in time. And again, he was doing this with his dying breath, basically.
I mean, it even drove Katharine Hepburn to real tears.
It did,
because she knew that she was going to lose him very soon.
Oh yeah, and especially that one line is like, I hope to be around for many more years. Hopefully this will happen within my lifetime. And it's just like, it's a really heavy movie. It is.
I mean, like I said, next Spencer Tracy dies just 17 days after the movie wraps up, and she never saw this movie.
No, and who could blame her? Who could blame her?
I mean, she just lost the man of her love.
Yeah, the love of her life, basically. And but I will say, despite him, despite the film schedule having to be extremely compromised and a lot of other things being compromised, in my opinion, out of the 4 movies, this one was his best work out of the 4.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to this movie too, it does have it has some laughs.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there is that scene with Spencer Tracy at a drive-in
with the ice cream.
Yeah.
Because I saw my grandfather in that scenario, where my grandfather would do the exact same thing at an ice cream parlor, where he would just go, "Oh, you know what I want," and then he would get something totally random. He's like, "This isn't what I want." Grumbles about it, eats it. Actually, that's not too bad, and and then just drive. And he's like, "Remember this next time I come in," and the waitress would just roll her eyes and walk off. Like, no, my grandfather has done that. I've been in the car with him when we do that at Andy's Burger Town.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the production design too, I mean, the way they built the house was really nice.
Oh my gosh! Again, driving home the point of not upper middle class, upper class.
Upper class family living in San Francisco.
Just high as it gets.
I mean, you literally with the terrace, you have a perfect view of the bay.
Oh my gosh, the background shots were amazing with the sunset. Oh, that was so good.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to this movie, it was a hit at the box office. It was one of the top 10 highest-grossing films of that year. It ended up earning 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Spencer Tracy. Cecil Calloway and Richards also received Oscar nominations as well. It also was nominated for the music score, which is really nice, as well as film editing. It ended up winning 2. Best Actress, Katharine Hepburn, and Best Original Screenplay, which I personally think it highly deserved.
Oh, yeah.
Because this movie, I mean, it was the script that really broke ground with this story.
And it is a very controversial, even by today's standards, I'd still argue it's highly controversial. Less so for the interracial, but more so for the language.
Yes, I mean, when it comes to nowadays, you're seeing a lot more interracial couples in movies, like, one I could think of is Sonic the Hedgehog movies.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And I also know that when it comes to this movie, it was sort of an influence for the 2018 horror film Get Out.
And not only that, but it was just a couple years later that we would get the Civil Rights Act, as well as we would see this kind of progression make way to television in the original Star Trek series.
Oh yes, that is true.
which just was just a couple
Yeah.
years later.
And when it comes to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, it was not only is it in the National Film Registry,
Oh yeah.
but it was also placed on 2 lists from the American Film Institute. It was named as one of the top 100 most romantic films, as one of the top 100 most best comedies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't like a laugh out loud comedy,
No.
but it definitely has a lot of heart.
It does.
It has as much heart as I would say it has as much heart as Father of the Bride, even more maybe, considering the very serious theme that they were doing with this movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, think about it. It was the time when segregation was just dying in the South, and while this movie was filmed, like I said, 17 states had marked it illegal to be in an interracial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time this movie was released, it had already been marked as unconstitutional in the Loving versus Virginia case, and now there could be couples all over the country.
Yeah.
So all in all, what would you give this film?
I'm still not going to recommend this film simply because of the strong language, but I'm going to be giving it a solid 3.5 out of 5.
I'm giving it 4 out of 5 because this movie was just groundbreaking.
It was.
And it's a shame that Sidney Poitier isn't around anymore to see this because, my God, he was really good in this.
All right.
Yes. And like I said, Spencer Tracy died just after this film was filmed, but his legacy still lives on. Not only does he have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but he was named by the American Film Institute as one of the top 10 greatest actors in Hollywood history.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to our next episode, we're going to be looking at another Oscar winner from Wisconsin, this time from Kenosha.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one I'm very interested in because he was in many genres: musicals, comedies, science fiction.
Yeah.
For our next episode, we're going to be looking at films starring Oscar winner Don Amici.
But that's going to have to be till next time.
Yes. Until then, I'm Chris Wyatt.
And I'm Jayden.
And thanks for watching this special episode of Chris's Classic Cinema. Hope to see you next time.
Okay.